Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined as I am every Tuesday by Andrew Erickson. We are talking buys and sells. This is our running backs focused episode where we're talking a little bit about Monday Night Football, the last doubleheader of the season at the top of the show. Then we'll get into some running backs to buy, running backs to sell, and then some buy, sell, and hold trios. And then we're going to have part two. You can check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts, where we're going to do wide receivers and a little bit of quarterbacks and tight ends as well. Like I said, this is the running backs episode. But before we get into the running backs, Erickson, we had our last Monday night doubleheader of the season finally last night. And it was a true doubleheader where they are not going on at the same time, but rather back to back. So you on the East Coast got one last taste of 10 p.m. kickoff NFL football. How did you enjoy the games last night?
Well, the Seahawks-Texans was a great rewatch this morning on Tuesday because I did not stay out to watch the entire Seahawks-Texans fiasco. That Texans offense, that's what it is. It's a fiasco. Not something that you're really impressed with. Nico Collins obviously missing with the concussion towards the end of the game. I really wanted to pump the brakes on the Texans offense after they destroyed the Ravens because it was the Ravens backup team, and the Tennessee Titans have been one of the worst teams in the NFL. So as I was previewing this game, I'm looking at some of Stroud's efficiency numbers. It's like season high or career high in passer rate. It's something ridiculous. I'm like, how is this possible? It's like, oh wait, it's because he faced the Ravens and the Titans the last two games. They face a real defense in Seattle. Tough matchup, and obviously a tough run out for that entire Texans offense.
Yeah, not just a more real defense, but one of the best defenses in football. Like it, the exact opposite end of the spectrum of the beat up Ravens and the Titans defense. And it pretty much looked like you might have expected. Dalton Schultz had a big game. I mean, some of that came after Nico Collins, left the game with a concussion. So we'll want to keep an eye on Nico because obviously that concussions, I know it didn't happen for Marvin Harrison Jr., but those tend to go beyond that initial week, especially on a short week for Nico. So definitely keep an eye on that. Probably not good. Is there like a top choice for you? Is it Jaylen Noel or anybody else in this offense that you are most interested in if Nico's going to miss time?
Probably Jaylen Noel, I think, would be the guy for me. He popped the most in this game, and that was even before Nico Collins got injured. He had season highs across the board in terms of routes, targets, receiving yards, receptions. Jaden Higgins kind of just hasn't really stepped up into a newer role. They're still running Xavier Hutchinson on a lot of the wide receiver snaps. Honestly, the guy I'm most confident about is probably Dalton Schultz. Again, you listed off, he had 10 targets, 9 for 98. Who is he playing in week 8? The 49ers. Who just destroyed the 49ers? Kyle Pitts. Why? Because they don't have Fred Warner anymore. So this is now a matchup to target for tight ends. Dalton Schultz is not a game breaker by any means, but he can go out, command targets when there's a depleted wide receiver room. So I do like Schultz as a streaming tight end this week. He'll probably be ranked in my top 15 this week, assuming that Nico Collins misses this game. But that's kind of my big takeaways from the pass catchers. The Texans can't run the ball. I mean, Woody Marks, you look at the snap share, you're like, yes. You look at the carries instead of Nick Chubb, doubled his carries, you're like, yes. Just don't look at the rushing yards, which he's got 15 rushing yards on 10 carries. That's absolutely terrible. Woody Marks this season is second worst.
And he had a long of 11, which means the other 9 carries went for 4 yards.
Yeah, it was, the Texans offensive line is just bad. Like, point blank, and anyone is going to struggle running the ball. Looking at this season in totality, Woody Marks he ranks second to last. Ranks dead last in rushing success rate at 24%. But, again, it's not all on him because Chubb is also in the bottom 10 in that category. So, he's salvaging his fantasy value because he's seeing high-value opportunities. He's getting the red zone usage, which you love. He caught a touchdown in this game, and he's seeing passes out of the backfield because Stroud's got to get the ball out quick because there's pass rushers in his face constantly because the offensive line is giving up a ton of pressure. So those are the positives for Woody Marks, but I don't think that the rushing is going to improve necessarily. The 49ers did a great job of stuffing out the Falcons' run game, which is one of the best in the NFL last week. So I'm expecting the Texans' run game to probably struggle here again in week 8.
I think in general, not talking about next week's matchup specifically, but in general, like I do think your expectations for the Texans offense should be something in between what they were against the beat up Ravens and what they were against in Seattle against the Seahawks defense. It will probably be something in the middle, but the offensive line is not getting any better. And obviously the pass catching situation is not getting better if Nico does miss time. On the other side of this one, like obviously JSN did his usual thing. He's amazing. Really the backfield is the only kind of thing I wanted to highlight, just like Zach Charbonnet again on Kenneth Walker's birthday. Zach Charbonnet getting both, the touchdown opportunities at the goal line, scores on both of them. I didn't actually go back and double check this. I have no reason to believe the tweet wasn't correct, but I did see a tweet last night that said Charbonnet has outscored Walker in 5 of the 6 games that they've both played this season. Are you like, obviously so much of that is driven by the touchdown, opportunities and the goal line usage. Would you like give any weight to considering like I don't want to say ranking Charbonnet ahead of Walker, but like putting them closer together in rest of season rankings if Charbonnet is going to continue to be the guy who gets the most valuable thing you can get, which is these scoring opportunities?
No, I get the idea to do that, but I know Walker is the better running back, right? So I get that.
But does Seattle know that?
Well, they gave him more carries in this game. He had 17 carries, and he was or he actually wasn't more efficient in this particular game. And of course, on one of his big runs, it gets called back on an offensive holding penalty. So that's super frustrating. It just is what it is. It's just a 50-50 committee. Charbonnet is the favorite guy in the red zone. If you feel confident projecting the games where he's going to score a touchdown, which, I mean, it's more likely than not. I mean, Seattle's been a good team this year. They're playing with positive game scripts. Who do they have upcoming next week? I mean, they're on a bye in week 8, so then they have the Commanders. That's a bad defense. Cardinals. That's not, an elite defense by any means. So I get the idea of doing that, but you're going to put Charbonnet ahead of Walker, and then it's the 1 week where he doesn't score, and Walker ends up being the more efficient running back, and then you're pulling your hair out. So I do agree that they probably should be ranked closer in rest of season rankings. If you're going to make me pick one, I'm still going to go with Walker because I just think that he's the better, more explosive, more efficient running back, and usually you want to bet on those guys rest of season versus the running backs who are more dependent on the touchdown equity. To your point, though, it is a really, really frustrating situation for fantasy managers because you don't feel like you can start Charbonnet, even though he keeps scoring touchdowns, because that's harder to bank on versus, like what I just pointed out, Walker had 17 carries in this game, and they were talking about getting him more volume. So they're on a bye week, so you get a break from the Seahawks backfield for at least 1 week.
Yeah.
And then we'll reassess it when we get back to week 9 when they go to Washington.
The first game of the doubleheader was Tampa Bay at Detroit. Jahmyr Gibbs was insanely good. No surprise. He's always great, but just shout him out. That 78-yard touchdown, like, I know the numbers said it was, I think, the 3rd fastest time a ball carrier has reached this year. It was the fastest I can remember a player looking. Like, eye test, which obviously cannot distinguish between like 22 miles an hour versus 21.8 miles per hour. But eye test, I was like, that's the fastest I've ever seen an NFL player. Like, he just was completely burst out of a cannon. It was incredible. So Gibbs is awesome.
He was almost looking like he was doing a spin dash, some might say, from a character he likes to portray himself as, Sonic the Hedgehog. So yeah, that man fast.
I have no Rolodex for Sonic references, by the way. I never saw the movies. I never like really played Sonic. I played video games, just not really
out,
Sonic.
Man. Yeah. Those are classics.
I just kind of missed it for whatever reason. I'm sure everybody's gonna love hearing that. Yet another reference that is going over my head. But yeah, Gibbs looked amazing. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he had 10 targets. Nobody else on the team had more than 3. And honestly, like watching the game, you could have convinced me he had like 15. Like I just felt like every time they dropped back to pass, St. Brown was just wide open. And they sometimes hit the play, sometimes didn't. But his 6 for 86 and a touchdown like almost feels like less than what it should have been. It felt like he was really, kind of in control in that game. But so, yeah, there's not really much to stand out, I don't think, on the Lions side. It was the stars kind of being stars. I mean, Laporta just had 3 catches for 15 yards, but, everybody else kind of did what we expected them to do. On the Bucs side, like Rachaad White did not do anything, obviously, with this opportunity with Bucky Irving still out. He had just 10 carries for 38 yards. He did have 4 catches, but then went for a total of 6 yards, so he was doing nothing. Mike Evans, the kind of the big headline takeaway, just him, breaking his collarbone, and it looked really bad. He was on the turf for a while. It was unclear at first, like if it was something to do with the leg because he's had hamstring injuries. And then they said it was a concussion and kind of that like collarbone, shoulder area. Egbuka, partially as a result of that, I guess, because he did get more of his targets later in the game. Led the team with 12 targets despite people thinking he wasn't going to play the entire week with his own hamstring issue. He only caught 4 of those passes for 58 yards. Tez Johnson had also 4 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. Not a ton of stars standing out in this game on either side besides Gibbs and St. Brown. It was a lot of kind of lower scoring fantasy days from, even the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff, both under 250 yards, just 1 touchdown each. So I kind of threw a lot of numbers at you, Erickson. On the Tampa Bay side, I guess really the big thing is, what is this going to look like with Mike Evans out for a while? And, Cade Otton led this team in receiving. Is he somebody that you think is going to step up long term with no Evans?
Yeah, this is what the Cade Otton special, right? Tweeted out last week, picture of Rob Gronkowski in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers uniform. This is Cade Otton when all the other Buccaneers receivers are hurt. He just turns into Gronk. Now, being a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, he's not obviously Rob Gronkowski, and he made a few mistakes in this game, but he is trusted by Baker Mayfield. He's an underneath target for Baker Mayfield, so he can be streamed if you need a tight end this week. It is National Tight End Day this upcoming week, so keep that in mind. So, again, against the Saints, I think that's a fine matchup even on the road. So, Cade Otton is definitely on the streaming radar. Again, he also had a 2-point conversion attempt that failed, but Baker Mayfield will frequently look for him in the end zone. I would say Ibuka just, I don't know, I had this spidey sense all year when it seemed like Ibuka was never actually going to play on the field with Godwin and Mike Evans at the same time. And that seems like it's probably going to be like the most likely outcome now. So I don't think that we ever talked about Ibuka as hey, this guy's a screaming sell just because of how fantastic he looked, even though we knew some of the receivers were coming back. I felt like we were just, man, like he's probably just too good. Just hold him. And I understand. I understood the theory behind, well, these guys are going to come back. They're going to eat into his target share. He's performing so well above expectation, et cetera, et cetera. But then but he's also just really good, and he's a rookie, and now it's really played out in his favor, right? Where the other guys are getting banged up, they are a little bit older. Receivers, obviously, you can never project exactly how injuries will play out, but so far it's been a basically sun run for Ibuka when it comes to being the number 1 target, and I would expect him to be a top 12 fantasy wide receiver rest of season. I would say Mike Evans still has a chance of coming back, so I don't know if that he's a downright drop. Collarbone injuries can take anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, so it's possible he could come back for the fantasy playoffs. So I would say if you have an IR spot, keep him there. If you have a winning record, keep him on your roster or your bench. But if you obviously need wins now, you got to make moves now, then he would be one of the guys that you can probably cut just because you can't wait.
Let's get into the Week 8 running backs to buy and sell. As I always remind everybody, these are not necessarily buy lows and sell highs. They can be, but they are not necessarily that. They are just buys and sells. Sometimes they are buy highs and sell lows, kind of on the other end of that spectrum. Erickson, where do you want to start off here for the first running back to buy?
Always be buying Bill Croskey-Merritt, running back for the Washington Commanders. Not a great game against the Dallas Cowboys. A smash spot, just 13 carries for 33 yards. However, I still think that he is the main guy in the Commanders' backfield. Still played 49% of the snaps ahead of Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez. Now, there's always a risk where McNichols takes over a little bit more on third downs and pass-catching situations. But I just think that right now, the state of the Washington offense, JCM is their biggest playmaker, right? We don't know the status of Deebo. We still don't know when Terry's coming back. Jaden Daniels is banged up. So I think they're going to have no choice but to turn to Jacory Croskey-Merritt. And I like the schedule overall rest of season. It's top 10 rest of season schedule for running backs. This week isn't, again, ideal against the Kansas City Chiefs, but the Chiefs did just put one of their defensive tackles on injured reserve, so that maybe opened up some opportunities. I also just think that the Commanders are going to rely more on the run. We saw this in 2 games with Marcus Mariota. They were negative 3% pass rate over expectation. And in both those games, Croskey-Merritt didn't necessarily light up the box score, but he was really efficient in both those games, having a 50% higher or rushing success rate in both those contests. It was also before that kind of unlocked him as the guy. He was still in a timeshare in those Marcus Mariota starts earlier in the year. I think that it's clear that he is their favorite running back and the guy that they need to lean on. So I like buying him on the dip, especially because he's coming off a bad game. Daniels is banged up. Again, we talked about buying him really low a couple weeks ago. That ended up being a good proposition to make. And I think right now his stock is pretty low. So buy low for me.
I know that the usage wasn't the same early in the season as it has been since he's kind of taken over the backfield more, but it is when you look at his game log, if you take away that Chargers game where he, finishes as top 5 running back in the week. Obviously 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. The big breakout. If you take that away, then since week 2, he does not have double-digit fantasy points in half PPR scoring. He's been RB 64, 26, 43, 5, 36, and 44. So he hasn't even been an RB2 in any game since week 1, excepting that one blow up against the Chargers. So it's not just coming off of one bad game. It has been just kind of quite missing. Now, again, he's taken over more of the backfield since those early season stuff, but it hasn't really translated into this great fantasy performer outside of that one week 5.
I mean, just bet on running backs that you think are good, right? Again, it's a buy low for a reason, Worm. Like, that's what we're trying to do here. So
I'm just painting the opposite. When I agree with you, people are like, "Oh, Worm disagrees with everybody all the time." Now here I'm giving you a little pushback, and you're like, "We'll just buy a good play." I mean, I can't win here.
No. I appreciate the pushback. That's obviously what we need for great content. I guess for me, it's just you want to buy running backs that I think are good. Right, I just think that he's a good running back, and that was the theory behind the play before the Chargers game, right? When we were talking about buying Jacory Croskey-Merritt, and again, that matchup ended up being better than we thought it might be. So, look, running back is tough right now, especially with 6 teams on bye. Like Croskey-Merritt, you're probably going to have to be starting this week for most part. So, I think that if you're hurting a running back, you have guys on bye, Croskey-Merritt. It's really more about the price. I think that you're right about him being frustrating, but that's why I think he can be acquired for really, really little, because the stock has fallen so far. And to your point, he isn't putting up these massive fantasy totals, but I'm looking at betting on the efficiency that I've seen from him as a rusher, and that I think that the team might lean on him a little bit more with Daniels banged up.
Yeah, I get the price thing. I know you hit on the matchups a little, but like 5 of the next 6 games at Kansas City, Seattle, Detroit, Denver, at Minnesota. Sprinkled in there is an at Miami, which is obviously really enticing. There's also a bye week sprinkled in there as well. But 5 of the next 6 games are, Chiefs, Seahawks, Lions, Broncos, Vikings. That's, not that enticing. Let's go to your next running back to buy here.
Yeah, so Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals. And this one is really, really driven by the schedule, rest of season. You look at the strength of schedule tool on FantasyPros, the Bengals have the number 1 schedule rest of season for running backs and the number 1 schedule for running backs in the fantasy football playoffs. So the Chase Brown stock, and talking about stock that has fallen off dramatically since draft season, Chase Brown, I don't think anyone has really fallen off since then in a larger capacity. But over the last couple weeks, with Joe Flacco under center for the Bengals, we've seen Chase Brown kind of pop off a little bit. He's been more efficient the last 2 weeks, especially against Pittsburgh, where he had over 100 rushing yards on just 11 carries, with over 100 yards coming after contact, 6 missed tackles forced. Looking like the guy that, hey, we thought could be a potential league winner when we were drafting him. Now, so many things changed. The offensive line struggled in the beginning of the year. Joe Burrow obviously got injured. But I think that just matchups and price make Chase Brown a buy for a lot of these reasons. So I get that he's still splitting some time with Samaje Perine. That hasn't been ideal, but for me, it's about just buying into the matchups, right? At running back. And I think the Chase Brown stock has dipped enough where a fantasy manager might be willing to ship him off. Again, hasn't scored a lot of touchdowns this season, but the Joe Flacco thing, man, I underestimated what he could do in this offense, right? I was wrong about, selling Jamar Chase a couple weeks back. That ended up being a really bad take. And he's just really elevated things. The thing I think is most amazing to me when it comes to Flacco is the offensive line has played so much better. And I'm like, did this offensive line just hate Jake Browning or something? Because all of a sudden, Joe Flacco is just operating from these flawless, clean pockets between this offensive line. So I don't know, they're getting the ball out quick. Joe Flacco still is bad under pressure. His numbers under pressure have been terrible, even with the Bengals. But if you get the ball out in a nanosecond to Jamar Chase and you're trying to get a semblance of a run game going with Chase Brown, it really hasn't mattered. So yeah, I'm just buying the matchups with Chase Brown and hoping that, hey, with an improved offensive output, he can produce fantasy RB2 numbers.
So he's not ranked as an RB2 rest of season consensus rankings, which are updated on fantasypros.com/rankings. But he just barely misses. He's RB 25 in those rest of season rankings right now. That's in half PPR scoring. You talk about him performing like an RB2. Does that mean that you think that RB 25 is too low? Where do you have him ranked rest of the season?
I'm pretty sure I probably have him ranked somewhere in that general vicinity. Because again, you are trying to capture what is the market viewing Chase Brown as. I think that you kind of have to limit his ranking a little bit. So I have him, I have him in a similar range. Mine haven't been updated since last night, so I need to move some other pieces around. He's also kind of in this cluster of running backs. Again, I'm not looking at the ECR ones, but I'm looking at mine. But he's in a territory with guys like Etienne, Mason, the Panthers running backs, Kamara, Rashad White, Jaylen. Like, is that the vicinity that he is in, right? With all those types of running backs.
Yeah.
Where
It's kind of funny. Some of those names are very different in ECR. Like Etienne is way up at RB18, so he's a lot higher. But yeah, Dowdle's there, David Montgomery, Kamara, Mason, Dobbins, Omarion Hampton is in that range, Rhamondre. Those are kind of the names that he's around in ECR.
So I think a lot of those guys have a lot of pros and cons to them. So it is kind of a conglomerate of, okay, well, which running back do you, like, why buy into said running back? And for me, what's the positive case for Chase Brown is I like the schedule rest of season. I think it's really good for him to perform above expectation. So that's why he would be a buy low for me. And again, you mentioned, if I could flip Rhamondre Stevenson for Chase Brown, I'm doing that in a second.
I think a lot of these names I would actually trade for Chase Brown, honestly. Like a lot of the names that I have just read off, I would rather have Chase Brown than, which I don't know that I actually realized until I started reading off the name. Like, I think I'd rather have Chase Brown than David Montgomery, like, barring an injury to Gibbs, which obviously, we're not going to be sitting here predicting. I think I might rather. I'm a really big believer that Flacco can do at least enough to let the good Bengals players take advantage of the schedule. I'm not saying Flacco's going to lead them to the playoffs or anything crazy like that, but I am buying into the narrative that he can sort of save the fantasy seasons for at least their main three guys. And again, taking advantage of that schedule. So I'd rather have Chase Brown than David Montgomery. I'd rather have Chase Brown than J.K. Dobbins, I think, rest of the season as of right now. I would rather have him than probably either Panthers running back, just because I don't know what the usage is going to look like there. I'd rather have him than maybe Alvin Kamara. I'm a believer in him, and I think he should be ranked as an RB2. I think RB25 is, I'm not saying it's wildly low, but I do think it's a little bit too low. Would you rather have him or Jacory Croskey-Merritt rest of the season?
I think I'd still rather have Croskey-Merritt. I'm definitely probably the higher one on him. And I got to talk about the reasons why I still like buying on Bill, just because I think that he's looked good this year. He's been really efficient. So I like those reasons. But to your point about some of these other running backs that we talked about, if there's no reason for you to keep that running back, or if you're not trying to buy Dave Montgomery, then sell him. Sell him for Chase Brown, because you see I'm trying to paint the picture for why Chase Brown can be better than he was to start the year. And I think that the matchups, again, we see those running backs all the time. Who's facing Miami this week, right? I believe that, the Bengals, their weeks 14 through 16 schedule, Bills, Ravens, Dolphins, right? Like, just having him for week 16 against the Dolphins is warrant him to be traded for.
Enough, yeah.
That alone is making it worth trading for Chase Brown, because when do you play the Dolphins? If
you're a first place team, you should actually, like, if you're like 7-0 and like you're sitting real pretty here, like, I actually would say for week 16 alone, go trade for Chase Brown.
Yeah, I mean,
and who knows, maybe, there's a chance Burrow's back for that too, and the offense looks even better than it does with Flacco. So
yeah, I just think that another really efficient week from Chase Brown, and I think his price is going to go up significantly. And even though it was a primetime game and he looked good, he still didn't score. I don't think that he scored a touchdown. So I still think it's and there are Samaje Perine concerns with his touch volume. But yeah, man, this Flacco thing, just he's moving this offense, and it really over what I expected, at least.
Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. We know Tuesdays are for scouting the waiver wire. Once you're done finding your diamond in the rough, head on over to Hard Rock Bet. See what their odds are to score another touchdown. See what their yardage total over is on Hard Rock Bet. You don't have to wait for week 8 to kick off to get in on the action. There's always something to bet on. If you haven't tried your first bet on Hard Rock Bet yet, there's still time for you to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you get not only your winnings, but $150 in extra bonus bets. There's new promos every day, so if you're listening to this later, just open the app and check out what you've got on any day of the week. Download the Hard Rock Bet app and make your first deposit. Erickson, who is your first running back to sell?
Alvin Kamara for the New Orleans Saints. He is a sell high for me, and that's because I think that with this Kendre Miller injury, you're going to see his value spike, and I don't think that's for the right reasons, because last week he had all of the snaps and touches in this backfield, 85% of the snaps. He had 29 yards on 14 touches. The receiving target usage has been up and down with Spencer Rattler. Some games it's been okay. Other games it's really not been a factor. The Saints also just put one of their starting offensive linemen on injured reserve, Eric McCoy. And Kellen Moore was talking about rookie Devin Neal after the game on Monday where, yeah, Devin Neal's going to have a role in this offense. So I don't think it's just, okay, all of Kendre Miller's carries now go to Alvin Kamara, and now he's going to be a smash. He's been the RB1 in this backfield for most of the season. Now, Kendre Miller has been good, and I think that he has affected Kamara's output. But even with the opportunities Kamara has had, he's RB16 in expected fantasy points per game. He's RB32 in actual fantasy points per game. He's PFF's 5th lowest graded running back. He's facing the Bucs, the Rams, and the Panthers the next 3 weeks. And we've talked about this on a couple different shows. Panthers, they're like a legit run defense now. they're not a bad run defense anymore. So 3-game stretch of tougher matchups against running backs. I think that you can use the Miller injury as a reason to sell high on a running back that's been underperforming all year long. So for those reasons, I think Alvin Kamara would be a sell high for me. And it's a weird scenario of sell high because you're not selling high off a performance because it hasn't been performance driven. It's a narrative driven where, oh, Kendre Miller's out, Kamara to the moon. Does anyone go to the moon on the Saints? like that's my concern with him. So I think that there is a floor with Kamara that I kind of think it's always been there just because he is involved in the passing game. He is the starting running back. He should still play a significant amount of snaps. But is that going to be a difference maker in fantasy or a mule leader when if someone else thinks that, I will happily trade him away to that manager for something with more upside.
But what do you think you can get for Alvin Kamara? Because you're right. He's not truly a sell high because the performance hasn't been there. But he's clearly like the narrative of Kendre Miller being hurt is going to boost his value right now. So like, what do you think is the actual return you could get for somebody like Kamara who has this big name brand value in terms of what he's been for years and years for managers, has not been good at all. He has 1 touchdown this season, and it was back in week 1. He's only finished inside the top 20 amongst running backs in half PPR scoring once since week 1, and it was an RB16 finish in week 6. I mean, like, what do you think you can get for him right now? Like, how much does the Miller injury boost him in terms of names like that you would throw out that you think you could get for him?
Ashton Genty? After
an
abysmal game? I don't know, man. People are running to the hills when it comes to these Raiders, and I don't necessarily disagree. Look,
I don't think you can get Ashton. If you can do that, I totally agree with that. But I don't think anybody is, at least not in a 1-for-1. I think it'd be like Kamara plus a pretty sizable piece, in my opinion.
So then maybe it's really not a 1-for-1 trade that you're trying to do. I think maybe you're packaging Kamara. I think the thing with trades too is when you package Kamara for one other player, the other person that's looking at that deal, they see Kamara and they're thinking, Kendre Miller is out. Maybe that's really good for Alvin Kamara. They kind of try to convince themselves why they should buy into Kamara and take this deal because, Kendre Miller's out. Maybe this is a really good thing for him. And again, I'm not saying that it's a negative for Kamara. I think that overall it should boost something, but to the extent that his market value should be boosted that significantly higher, that's where I get concerned. So look, I think it's a price check because some people may think on my side of things where, no, Kamara has not been that great this year and they're expecting Devin Neal. So it's more maybe a price check where put Kamara on the block, see what kind of offers you can get, especially for a team that has a lot of running back issues. What's the best receiver they have on their team? Maybe a flip for that, or maybe you're packaging him with somebody else to try to move up to that next tier, like a Genty, like a Derrick Henry, like a Javonte Williams, where you're using Kamara as a piece with something else to move up.
I would trade Kamara for Trace Brown if you can. J.K. Dobbins, so I just said, I would have lower than Brown. I would trade for Dobbins. Walker, DeAndre Swift. I think those gets into more of an obvious range that we would be kind of on board with. Here's the one I want to throw at you. Would you trade Alvin Kamara for a Marion Hampton, knowing that you're going to be missing X number of weeks for Hampton, but that, he should be the bell cow once he returns?
I think this one's probably dependent on your record, right? It's really hard to trade for an injured running back when you need wins right now. That would be my only hesitation, but I would agree that the upside play when we're talking about this 6 weeks from now, this could be Hampton easily. And we can reflect on this trade and think, wow, I can't believe I was able to trade Kamara to get Montgomery and Hampton. So it's more of a
I would say, as a general rule, not even just talking about Kamara, if you're in first place, go find the Marion Hampton manager and say, hey, it's there are 6 teams on bye. He's not going to be back anytime soon, and make an offer.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That makes a lot of sense.
Who's your other running back to sell, Erickson?
Rhamondre Stevenson for the New England Patriots, just because I've seen this before where he has one really good game and then the next week it just absolutely crumbles. Happened against Miami, looked like an absolute monster, and then the next week he just does absolutely nothing. So coming off one of his best outings of the year, 18 carries for 88 yards, 77% of the snaps. I think that this is prototypical perfect sell high window, because who are they playing this week? The Cleveland Browns. Right, one of the tougher run defenses, even though the Patriots are playing at home. Again, after that, it's the Falcons, Bucks, Jets, some decent run games or run defenses. So I think you just got to sell high on Rhamondre. You can flip Rhamondre for the 2 guys we talked about earlier, Chase Brown or Jacory Croskey-Merritt. I think that's the move to make. Trayvon Henderson is not going to play 14% of the snaps every single week. They even talked about that post with Mike Vrabel. He just said, yeah, no, Rhamondre was hot, so we just kept riding the hot hand. Maybe that continues, or maybe Rhamondre fumbles again, right? Because that happens pretty frequently with this running back. So I have serious trust issues with Stevenson. He's a running back that it's really hard to click the button on in starter sit situations. This matchup was good against the Tennessee Titans. This matchup against the Cleveland Browns is not good. So if you look at the matchups that Stevenson has blown up against, it's been these really, really favorable spots. Titans was a great matchup. Dolphins was a great matchup. Browns is not a great matchup. So if you're just, and then this Patriots backfield overall is really frustrating, just like up and down. So I think that this is just the perfect time to like, hey, you want to wipe your hands clean, just trade it for Chase Brown. Just like you just rather would have Chase Brown rest of the season than Rhamondre. I feel really confident saying this, and maybe this is another cold takes exposed thing coming back to me, but I don't know, Worm. How do you feel about this?
What I'm wondering is if you see the flip side of this as you are still interested in buying Henderson, because while this upcoming matchup is difficult, and I would not want to be starting Stevenson this week if I could avoid it. It is by Mageddon, so maybe you have to, but I would not want to start Stevenson against the Browns. But if you kind of feel like it's time to put the nail in the coffin on our hopes and dreams for Trayvon Henderson this season, then I wouldn't want to get away from Stevenson, because I am a believer in Drake May. I'm a believer in this offense against what is a very good schedule after this short stretch here, because it's Cleveland and Atlanta back to back. You know, the back half of the season, though, for the Patriots schedule is really, really juicy. Unfortunately, that Miami game, his next one comes in week 18, so he won't get another one of those.
The playoffs, he still have Bills, Ravens, Jets.
Bills and Ravens are still in the fantasy playoffs. Week 14 bye is there, which isn't nothing. But I'm a believer in Drake May, which means I'm a believer in this offense, which means I'm a believer in whoever the lead running back is. And I think it's totally valid to sit here and say, like, if he didn't do it against Tennessee, if he didn't do it against, Miami earlier in the season, if he didn't do it against Buffalo earlier in the season, that like it's just not happening for Henderson. And if Stevenson's going to be the lead back here, then maybe he's worth actually targeting and not looking to sell. If you don't believe that, if you say, no, I still just I'm going to buy into Trayvon Henderson, I'm going to go down with that ship, then yes, I think it makes a lot more sense to sell him. But I would have very low expectations for the next couple of weeks. Again, I would try to not start him if you can, but the back half of the schedule is so nice that if he's still the lead back in this backfield, when we get to that part of the schedule, I'd rather have him on the team.
So how confident are you him being the starting running back still?
I'm not.
so that's kind of why it's like, just let it be someone else's problem, especially if you can get something back decent for it. Again, this isn't saying that Stevenson has no more value. That's not the case. Again, you have to trade something of value most of the time to get something back of value. So I just think that with the ups and downs of Stevenson and again, I don't know what's going to happen with Henderson. I do know that rookie running backs tend to hit more in the second half of the year than the first half. Like, that is a fact. Like, that happens every single year. So Henderson's going to have a bigger role than he had this past game, right? He's had bigger roles than he had this past game. I don't know how good he's going to be because he's not been good this season, but Bills, Ravens, Jets, I mean, if Henderson has a bigger role in those matchups in weeks 14, 15, and 16, or 15, 16, and 17, then Rhamondre may not be as productive. So I just kind of want to wipe my hand clean of any risk of that even happening because it's still a potential. And I just think that Stevenson after a monster game when I think, to your point, everybody's basically ready to bury Travion Henderson just because this was rock bottom for him. I think that this is a good sell high window.
And by the way, monster game. It was still under 100 yards, and he just had one touchdown, right? It's like his ceiling is still under 20 fantasy points, even in these big blow-up spots. I would trade him for Chase Brown. I think that's a good call. Just quickly, no explanation. Just give me a name. Would you rather have Stevenson or Kamara rest of the season?
I think I would rather have Kamara.
In fantasy sports, flexibility is everything, especially when you're managing injuries, bye weeks, or tough matchups. Your finances deserve the same level of control, and that's exactly what Klarna delivers. Klarna is your smarter, everyday spending partner. Inside the app, you can track purchases, compare prices, find deals, earn cash back, and choose to pay now or later with no interest when payments are made on time. It's the kind of tool that helps you stretch your money further and make every purchase count. This isn't about spending more, it's about spending wisely. Klarna fits seamlessly into how you already shop, whether you're picking up groceries, upgrading tech, or even just keeping an eye on your budget. Klarna gives you the financial flexibility to shop smart and stay in control, just like a good roster move. Download the Klarna app or head to Klarna.com to learn more. CA resident loans made or arranged pursuant to a California finance law license, NMLS number 1353190. Klarna balance account required. Klarna may get a commission. Limitations, terms, and conditions apply. Let's go to the buy, sell, or hold trios here. First one I have for you, Cam Skattebo, Quinshon Judkins, Breece Hall. Again, that's Skattebo, Judkins, and Hall, buy, sell, or hold.
I think I'm going to hold Quinshon Judkins. He's a bell cow, although I don't know. There's still a chance that he could get suspended at some point, so that's always something I'm trying to be aware of when I'm explaining what to do with him. So for the most part, I just think that he's a good hold. I know he's coming off the game against Miami, so maybe it would be a better sell high situation for him, but I think I'm probably just going to sell or hold him. I don't want to sell Cam Skattebo though. I've already been down this road with, the schedule's really tough, and that was totally wrong, and he's an absolute monster. So I'm just gonna, I guess I'm gonna buy him, and I guess it means I have to sell Breece Hall. I get, you can sell him based on the idea that he's gonna get traded, I guess, and maybe that's good for his fantasy value. But the Jets are a dumpster fire right now, and even though he's getting pretty favorable usage, just the offense is holding him back significantly. So yeah, I think that I would probably lean more on buying most of these running backs, but if you're making me, I guess maybe the better way to explain it is, who do I have ranked lowest rest of season? It's probably Breece Hall.
You're going to throw people off because I have to remind them every week that this is not a ranking. This is like market value and buy, what can you get the most for, and then it makes sense to move off of. So don't mention rankings because you're going to confuse the audience.
These trios confuse me. Because
they're supposed to be difficult. You're the expert here, though. I think that who do you think you would get the most for out of these three? I think it's clearly Judkins or Skattebo. I think because Hall is ranked lowest. Who do you think you would get more for, Skattebo or Judkins?
Probably Skattebo. I think that. Everybody loves him, so I think he's probably the most. And Judkins, I think that people or most fantasy managers know and can acknowledge that there is still that suspension thing potentially lingering, and he did just play the Dolphins, and we've seen.
I was gonna say the Miami of it all is.
There's a pretty clear pattern of, hey, guy goes off against the Dolphins the next week, doesn't face the Dolphins, and it isn't nearly as good. So maybe you're right. Maybe Judkins would be the sell high just because he does play on the Browns. What is the upside? He is facing the Patriots this week. Man, Worm, great job, man. Kudos to you, dude. Yeah, I think Judkins, you probably got to sell Judkins just because he's the guy you can get the most for, and his outlook this week in particular is going to be the biggest fall off in terms of what your expectation is versus Skattebo, which is already high expectation. He's facing the Eagles again. He had a great game against them 2 weeks ago, so you want to hold on to that in Breece Hall. Bottom of the barrel type of guy you can acquire. And if he does get traded, his value just skyrockets. So Good job, Warren. Good job.
That's what I would have done is sell Judkins.
So we got to the right answer in the
Yes.
end.
to my correct answer, you landed there. All right, next trio here. Jaylen Warren, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne. Again, that's Warren, Swift, Etienne. Buy, sell, or hold.
Travis Etienne, definitely selling. 100% selling Travis Etienne. I have Etienne in a lot of spots, and I'm trying to desperately move off of him. The efficiency has fallen off the last couple games.
Do you think you can get a lot for him? I mean, under 8 fantasy points, 3 straight weeks.
Well, we did.
And on a bye.
No, it's not easy to try to move off him. And I feel like we talked about him a little bit earlier before we saw this type of fall off kind of happen. So hopefully people
he looks like a league winner after the first month of the season.
Yes, but this is what Etienne does, man. He always starts out the gates red hot, and then he falls off in the second half of the season. So I think that's happening yet again. I think we're going to see more of Bashal Tutin in the second half of the year. Tutin has been on the injury report almost every single week with a shoulder injury. I think that's going to mean he's going to be more involved. The matchups are brutal for the rest of the season for the Jaguars, not necessarily ideal. And you've seen that the last couple weeks when the Jaguars have faced tougher matchups, Etienne has not been nearly as productive. So they're still using 3 different running backs between LeQuint Allen and Tutin along with Etienne. So yeah, it's tough right now. You probably can't sell him as high on the bye week. I think maybe you should probably just wait one more week for him to come back and then try to sell him because you might get a little bit more. But yeah, I would be trying to move Etienne. Jaylen Warren and DeAndre Swift. Swift is probably the hold for me just because the Bears have a lot of great matchups coming up, and he's been put in favorable spots. This is classic DeAndre Swift, right? Just look absolutely terrible for the first month of the year and then come back and then turn into Barry Sanders for the next couple of games. So this is classic DeAndre Swift. So he would be a hold for me. And then I guess Jaylen Warren would probably be the buy by default. I think Warren has looked really good this year. He's popped off in a lot of rushing advanced metrics, especially in terms of missed tackles forced. I'm not like a massive believer in Kenneth Gainwell. I know that he's kind of sprinkled in here and there in certain matchups. I think that's probably how I would do it. I don't know. How do you feel?
I would agree. I would say that Swift would be my buy. The only thing I'm holding off on, and I recognize that we are still months away from this mattering, and matchups change all the time. The playoff schedule is not great for Swift. Week 14 on is at Green Bay, Cleveland, Green Bay again, at San Francisco. So that is discouraging, which is why if I'm trying to think long term and go for, again, it's a little early to be talking fantasy playoff schedule. Those teams could look very different between now and then based on injuries or trades or whatever. But I do really like what I've seen out of Swift in the last couple of weeks coming out of the bye. And I tend to be a believer that for the next, month and a half, he's going to be very good. I just worry about those matchups late in the season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's probably why I lean on the Warren side a little bit more, because look at the Steelers matchup. So the Packers this week, that's not great. But then it's Colts, Chargers, Bengals, Bears, Bills, Ravens, Dolphins, Lions. Again, week 17 at Browns. That's atrocious. But besides that, I think Warren's schedule is a little bit better. And again, I think that they are probably pretty closely ranked in terms of where they are rest of the season. Maybe Swift's a little bit higher. But I think
Swift is a hold for now, but I think in a month right leading up to the fantasy trade deadline, I'll be wanting to sell him.
I also like Kyle Monangai a decent amount too. I like him too. I think he's an underrated now, but they're both playing
you
well.
and I are Manon guys, okay? We like Kyle Monangai. Hopefully that goes better than being the Audric estimates.
I mean, part of that was because I did not like Swift that much, but to Swift's credit, he's playing really, really well. But both running backs have played significantly better with the Bears kind of figuring out their run game the last 2 weeks.
Last trio here, we'll go quickly because we're running pretty long. Jordan Mason, Rico Dowdle, David Montgomery. Again, that's Mason, Dowdle, Montgomery. You might notice the pattern on these three is they're guys that are kind of number twos in their offenses, but who are good players when given the opportunity. So obviously Mason has been starting for several weeks here with Aaron Jones hurt. Rico Dowdle, we know what he did for those 2 weeks. David Montgomery, we know what he can do if Gibbs wasn't in the picture. So I want to kind of put the three of them together since they all kind of fit that same archetype. So Mason, Dowdle, Montgomery, buy, sell, or hold.
I think Mason would probably be the buy for me. And this is obviously risky because Aaron Jones is theoretically coming back. But I don't know about you, Worm, but I've heard like nothing from Aaron Jones.
I was actually going to ask you during this segment. I was going to say, do we know? I feel like a couple weeks in a row I've been like, oh, he's probably pretty close, and then I just haven't heard.
Eligible to come back this week.
Well, I know, but well, why isn't he back?
I don't know. That's the thing. So I think there's maybe this fear, or maybe an unwarranted fear, of him coming back when I've heard nothing about them activating his 21 practice window or whatever. That's usually what they do when guys are coming off injured reserve. He is a bit of an older running back who has dealt with some injuries in the past. So, and even when both guys are healthy, I always envisioned Mason still having a role in this Vikings offense. So with offensive line getting healthier, Aaron Jones still like TBD, I think Mason, and again, he's facing the Chargers this week. This is a smash spot for Mason, especially if he is a bell cow. So even just in the short term, I think he's the guy I would rather have. The Panthers situation is a lot like the Seahawks, where the best guy may not even see the most amount of carries or touches. I think Rico's probably just a hold, because we know what the upside can be if someone were to get hurt. So I think but I guess you could make that same argument with David Montgomery. So now I'm talking myself out of that. Rico or Dave Montgomery as a sell. I mean, you can't sell Dave Montgomery after that dud. Another dud.
I actually forgot, by the way, just clicking on Jones, that they didn't put him on IR right away. So he hasn't been eligible to return until this week. So I do want to just bring that up in case that was confusing during that part of the conversation, like why he hasn't come back yet. They play Thursday night this week, I believe.
Yep,
so
they're playing the Chargers.
We will know early in the week if Jones were to return now that he is eligible. Like you said, we haven't heard really anything about like practicing or anything like that, but this is his first time that he can return. So we'll see if he does.
I think I just haven't been super high on Montgomery this year. I know he's a player that we've talked about selling before, so I don't know. I don't think I have any reason to change course now. So I think, again, both guys have extreme upside if their starters were to get hurt. But I guess if everyone's healthy, I think Dowdle has more of a case to overtake Hubbard than, Montgomery's not touching Gibbs in the Gibbs show in Detroit. So I guess I would sell Montgomery, hold Dowdle, and buy Jordan Mason.
Don't forget to check out our weekly trade live stream on our YouTube channel, where you can come and ask your specific fantasy trade questions. We'll be with you every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. For those listening on the podcast, just go to youtube.com/fantasypros, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified of all of our weekly live streams. Be sure to check out part 2 with wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends. For Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.